Hey out there, today is Monday, May 17th, 2021. Coming up on the show today, from PEN15, editor Tai Erskine.
And I read it and I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is really, this is what you guys have been concocting next door. Like, this is really something.
Editor Amelia Allwarden.
This is a comedy that gets really dark and it has a lot of very real moments. And we need the editing to be able to go seamlessly between the two.
And editor John Daigle.
Sam sort of took me out to lunch and sort of threatened me and said, if you don't actually come work on this season, we're done.
All that and a lot more on this episode of The Rough Cut. Okay, greetings once again, post-podcast aficionados. Thank you for once again downloading or streaming the show. Always good to have you here. I certainly hope you enjoyed last week's throwback episode on Bohemian Rhapsody. I definitely enjoyed revisiting that quite a bit for a number of reasons. One of which is I love it when we're fortunate enough to have multiple guests, multiple voices all sharing their perspective on the project we're discussing. And good news, we have 3 guests joining us today. From the Hulu original series PEN15, we have editors Tai Erskine, Amelia Allwarden, and John Daigle. Regrettably, editor Matt McBrayer, the 4th editor on the team, was unable to make it. He was busy editing, but he was with us in spirit. Now, faithful listeners of The Rough Cut, possibly even some unfaithful ones, might remember that Amelia was on last year, right around this time, to talk about another Hulu series, Little Fires Everywhere. So give that a listen if you haven't yet. Now, as for Tai and John, this is their first time on The Rough Cut. In fact, not only is this a first for having those guys on, this is the first time I've had an editor on where the editor's sister, or any other family member for that matter, was a star and creator of the series they were editing. That's right, Tai's sister Maya Erskine is one of the 2 leads and a co-creator and writer on the series. How about that? But wait, it gets better. Tai's mother, which basic math would tell you is Maya's mother as well, is also on the show playing, you guessed it, Maya's mother. What is that like? Well, it'll be fun to talk to Tai about it. And with all that said, I'm not going to go into a big explanation about PEN15 because we tee it up pretty good at the beginning of the interview. I will say this, it's a really well-done series and one of those ones where, even if you haven't seen it, you've probably heard or read about someone praising its originality and execution. So lots to talk about today. Before we get on with the show, let me tell you a little bit about our friends at Extreme Music. If you or any of your film and TV friends want to make amazing films, amazing TV, no matter what kind of story it is, you need to visit extrememusic.com. For over 20 years, they have been providing filmmakers and artists just like you with the best in production audio, all created by multi-award-winning musicians and composers, great music from people you know and some you don't know yet, but should. So you just go to their website, sign up for a free account, and get down to business searching for any kind of music your little heart desires. It's actually pretty fun and really simple to do. You do it all online, or they can personally lend a hand from one of their many, many worldwide offices. You don't just get the finished track, you can get it in all kinds of flavors, right down to the stems. You can go with vocals or no vocals, or just the keyboard track or no keyboard track. It is all up to you to decide. So make one of the best decisions you could ever make and partner up with Extreme Music to make your story sound its very, very best. Sounds like it's time to get on with The Rough Cut. From PEN15, here are Tai Erskine, Amelia Allwarden, and John Daigle.
I think Daigle's frozen for me.
Boy, he's either unbelievably happy or he froze.
He's so happy to be here.
I was suddenly the only person here.
This is reminding me of PEN15 Evercast sessions already.
Yeah,
just
seriously.
like totally frozen.
Yeah.
So, Tai, I thought I would start with you. Wikipedia, which we all know is the single source of truth in the world, describes PEN15 as an American cringe comedy streaming series, which honestly is not nearly enough to get the conceit of PEN15. So please explain the premise of PEN15, because usually with high-concept shows like this, the hook that makes it a high-concept show is evident in the story or in the conceit of the show itself. For PEN15, I really think it has a lot more to do with the casting.
Yeah, PEN15 is a middle school dramedy, I guess more of a comedy, but also kind of heavy at times, starring the amazing Maya Erskine and Anna Konkle, who are in their 30s, but they are playing 13-year-old versions of themselves. It's a period piece, I guess, now, which makes me feel really old. It takes place back in the year 2000. But all the other characters, all the children are actually played by real middle schoolers. So it's really weird. It's fun. It's a lot of fun to watch for most people. For me, Maya is my sister. So some of the episodes are a little extra cringy for me, I guess. And that's actually also my real mother, which I never expected to be editing her. So, yeah, that's the show.
Well, that's a pretty good summation, and you're right, Ty. Somewhere down the line here, I'm sure we'll address the familial relationship and the cringy part of it, because it's hard to watch this show knowing that is your sister. Again, we'll get to that. So, Amelia, despite the fact that the big hook is that the two leads are in their early 30s while the rest of the cast is in their teens, it never really feels like you guys are playing that up in the show. So what sort of guidance or direction were you given as far as helping the audience suspend their disbelief versus possibly there being times where you want to remind them of the fact that the leads are in their 30s at certain times?
I feel like we always tried to make them be as 13-like as possible. Anytime they improved or there were instances of performances that seemed more adult, I feel like we leaned away from that, because their body language and the way that they are inhabiting the characters is really supposed to be that you forget that maybe you watch the show and go like, they can't be 13, they might be 16, but that you get lost in it so easily that that's not even a factor anymore, that you're just feeling like, oh, that's me when I was 13. So I really feel like we tried to lean away from the adult leaning jokes as possible.
Well, so John, you joined the show in season 2 and cut the last 2 episodes of what is, I believe, the first half of season 2. When you do join a show that's already established in terms of the tone and the rest of the crew already knows each other, what is the onboarding process for you in terms of getting your feet under you and getting up to speed as fast as possible?
Well, I was really lucky in this particular scenario because I'm such a big fan of the show. And Ty and Amelia and Matt McBrayer, who had all edited the first season and were coming back for the second, they were incredibly welcoming to me. But it was really easy to slide in because I had watched the first season a few times just for fun. So coming in was pretty simple. The show was so well defined. The tone was so well defined in the first season. So it was just really meeting the work that everybody had done in season 1. I know Matt. Matt and I have been friends for a long time. So I spoke with him for quite a while before I joined the show, just to kind of get a lay of the land and how things worked and dynamics and expectations. And then when I joined the show, I actually got to meet Ty and Amelia and spent a lot of time, probably too much time, in their edit bays talking with them and just kind of getting to know them, but also just trying to learn everything I could very quickly about the show. Because I also joined kind of late in season 2. They had all been working for a few months by the time I came on board. So I had to get my legs under me pretty quickly. And thankfully, they're very generous with their time. So it was pretty great.
Well, sometimes it's kind of obvious as to how editors are assigned certain episodes because of maybe the shooting blocks that they're attached to, or maybe they work with a specific director who's been hired onto the series. With PEN15, it's kind of hard to determine because there's no real regular cadence to your respective episodes. And there were, I think, 3 different directors in season 1 who each had blocks of consecutive episodes. So maybe just explain the production mechanics of PEN15 and how the workload is shared across the post team.
Yeah, I guess season 1 I'm trying to remember, I think I had 2 episodes, 2, 4, and then 9 and 10. So I got really lucky. I got to actually work with, there were 3 directors in the first season, and I actually got to work with each director. It was Daniel Longino, Andy DeYoung, and then Sam Zwiebelman, who's also the 3rd co-creator of the show. And then the second season, I was actually originally going to do episodes 2 and 4, and then I ended up by switching to 2 and 3. And I'm not really sure what went behind all that. I'm not sure if it was everyone's availability or what. I mean, it felt almost kind of random. I'd read the scripts ahead of time, and I was actually really happy that I didn't end up by editing episode 4 because there's some really intense scenes with Maya and her mom. I was like, oh God, yeah, I'd originally been assigned the episode. I was like, this is going to be a nightmare. And then luckily that all switched up and I got the 3rd episode instead.
I feel like I remember in season 1 that it was, we did the episodes kind of out of order when we were finishing them. And I think that that's why the schedule was that way or something like that. I know for me in season 2, like I only had 1 episode in the first half because I was more weighted toward the back half, which hasn't come out yet because of my schedule coming in later. More when John joined in season 2. I joined just like a little bit after him because I was finishing another show.
So we've talked a couple times about the fact that season 2 is in 2 halves. What was the reason behind that? Pandemic related, or was it just always intended to be that way?
I believe it was always intended to be the 2A and 2B. It was always meant to, that 7th episode that John edited where They're driving off in Anna's dad's new convertible. And that was always meant to, I mean, I don't know if it's like a cliffhanger, but it was just kind of felt like a natural end to that first half of the story. And then I'm trying to remember, I mean, I think there's actually the second half, the other 7 episodes, but I believe there's also a 1 hour, there's like a special, an animated special that's supposed to, I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to be talking about this actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if that's, maybe it might not be public information.
Yeah, maybe
I'm leaving that in, Tai. I need a scoop, baby.
There might be another episode. There might be an episode in between the 2 seasons, but I don't know. I'm not sure. We'll see.
But yes, the original intent was originally 2 halves. So they were, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think they were supposed to come out about 5 or 6 months apart originally. Yeah. And then, of course, because of the pandemic, it's gotten pushed quite a bit.
Yeah, we had like 1 week of shooting left, actually. And then March 13th, we got shut down. And there's literally 1 more week. And now we'll see how it goes because these kids are growing. So we'll just see what they look like when they resume production. Hopefully not too different.
It seems like while there is somewhat of an arc that goes on throughout the season, especially season 2, in a lot of ways, the individual episodes stand on their own and feel like they could have been released at more than one time in the schedule. Was there a hard and fast release schedule for the episodes in advance, or was there some built-in flexibility in how the episodes played out into the season?
I mean, I think it was pretty built in the order of the episodes because, they're standalone, but the through line is very particular. Like in season 2, you've got episode 4, which Matt edited, and then episode 5, which I edited. It's kind of a couplet because it's Mora's story, and she gets introduced in 4, and she's gone in 5 by the end of 5. And then, John's 2 episodes were like a couplet. And so the through line in that way was always very particular in how they write the show. I think maybe in season 1, we had like a brief discussion about plopping 2 episodes, but we never ended up doing it.
So we started talking about the hook of the show and the leads being in their 30s and that you don't always play up to that. But there are times when you do want it to be obvious. You can see it sort of play out in cinematography in that there's like one shot. So if there's a somewhat romantic scene, or at least as romantic as you can get between these characters, when you get into those scenarios in post, how do you not so much cut around it, but what is it like working with those scenes where it's like, we are now going to be aware that the lead is in her early 30s and that kid she's talking to is 13, 14.
I'm going to let you guys feel that because I didn't have nearly as much of that in my
I was going to say Tai had that great in the finale of season 1.
When they're dancing, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, that made both Anna and I pretty uncomfortable when they were looking. They're like, oh, we're too close. But, like Maya's too close to Sam. And, they had discussions with the actor's older sister, who was kind of his guardian on set, and, made sure that she was very comfortable with everything. It's tricky. I mean, just editing some of those scenes can be, you can tell like when Maya and Anna and Sam are uncomfortable, then like maybe it's too much. Maybe we need to dial this back a little bit. Like in season 2, there's a scene in episode 2 where Maya's she's stalking the what's his name? Brant. Yeah, she's stalking him. She's obsessed with him and she's stalking him like in the first 2 episodes. And there's a scene where she finds him alone in the weight room and and is sitting next to him, and we had initially cut it with some wider coverage, and you can see like how close they are, and she goes to like reach to touch the back of his hair at some point, and we ended up by toning it down a little bit, even though Hulu initially didn't actually have a problem with it. But I think even Maya and Anna were kind of like, we gotta tone this down, like we gotta do something here. And some of that was just changing some of the angles and some of the performances and also tightening it a little bit. Actually, at one point we had music playing, which I thought helped to make it maybe a little less uncomfortable, but then we lifted that out and then it felt really kind of dry and real and a little icky, but that's kind of the show sometimes.
I think that's the first time someone said icky on the podcast. So thank you, Tai. Frankly, is that something that the 3 of you spend a lot of your time discussing with the director or showrunners, that cringe factor, that walking that line between should this make you feel, quote, icky, or is that what we want to play up here?
I mean, I think that's definitely the sensitivity of things, especially when it involves the kids. When it's just Maya and Anna, like, go all out, When it involves the kids, I think there's a lot of conversations just to make sure we're doing it right. We have body doubles for almost anything that's involving anything sensitive. Like even in the thong episode in season 1, like we had a body double whenever that character who was a kid was shown wearing the thong, if that's an adult, like even things like that don't involve, characters kissing and things like that. It's all kind of handled with the most sensitivity possible.
Yeah, right. That's reminding me too of the finale when they get felt up in the closet or the janitor's closet.
I didn't want to bring it up, Ty. I was going to leave that to you.
Yeah, right. No, that was also a body double, which fooled me. In fact, when I was watching, I was like, "Oh my god!" And they're like, "No, that's not him. Like it's like the back of it's someone else." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Yeah." So that's all taken care of on set.
So it sounds like there's a certain degree, as well scripted as the show is and as much experience as you all have, there's a certain degree of figuring out things as you go at times, probably in regards to improv as well. I'm assuming they try a lot of things on set just to give you all as much to work with as possible. So how would you describe the level of improv that takes place on the show, and how do each of you take that into consideration when you're building a scene?
A ton of improv.
Yeah.
Lots of improv. Well, they follow the script, but then how to get to each line always changes, or like a variation on the same line. And I mean, for me, my process is that I watch all the dailies, of course, like everything that they shoot start to finish. And anything that makes me laugh or makes me feel something weird, I like grab it and I just put it in a sequence. And then I kind of go back after I've watched all the dailies and I cut the scene as scripted. And then I insert any of that weird or funny stuff that I found along the way and see how I can make it happen. But sometimes their improv is a better way to get from point A to point B throughout the scene than it was as scripted. And so they really find those moments on set that are just pure gold.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit of improv. It's always just making sure that, especially when it's Maya and Anna, when it's just the two of them, they can really go crazy. And then you just want to make sure that it doesn't lead you to a dead end. So I kind of follow the same process immediately. I like try to cut it as scripted and then see if you can sprinkle in the improv and enhance the scene as much as possible. In fact, I feel like in the first season, early on, I wasn't, at least in my episodes, I felt like I would never get takes that were as scripted. Like they would always infuse some improv, and it was just like, oh. And at one point, someone from production, it might have been Sam, was just like, are you guys getting everything you need? Like, is there anything we can do? And I was like, I'm pretty sure I asked if there's any way we could actually get some of the scenes just the way they're written, just one take, even if it's just like the master of just the way it's written, just to have it. That would be helpful.
For some shows you walk in and you can pretty quickly, especially in scripted comedy, sometimes you can pretty quickly get a sense of the scene from the footage and then identify the improv pretty quickly and work it in. But with PEN15, it's a little bit, you had mentioned every episode has its own feel and its own tone. And even though there are continuous through lines, as Amelia mentioned, the episodes are kind of self-contained pieces. And so they're a little bit more, I don't want to say filmic, but they each have their own tone. Especially with the first half of this season, all 7 episodes were directed by Sam Zwiebelman, the co-creator. And I think Sam encouraged a sort of environment of improv, even in emotional scenes sometimes. So, we have a scene in the last episode between Anna and her mom where Anna apologizes to her mom finally for sort of shutting her out and villainizing her in a way and pitting her against her father. And even that scene, Melora Walters and Anna were great. And Sam had sort of directed the scene and allowed them to sort of freely communicate. So the script kind of became secondary in that scene. And it was just based on their performances. And they really went to this extraordinary place. But getting to the final version of the scene, it's a very worthwhile work, but it's a lot more labor when they have a scripted emotional arc and then they go in their own directions to get there, and you have to kind of pull that together. So it, similar to the comedy, in the emotional scenes, there was also a lot of different directions they go to get where they go. And so same as Amelia, I end up watching on this show, I watched every single frame of footage, even if it took all day, just because I really wanted to make sure I was getting all the bits that were usable. And you sort of end up there's a lot of shaping done in post, even while the scenes are really sharply written, really sharply shot. There's a lot of work on our end to sort of help pull each scene and each episode together and form that tone.
Well, John, that's really interesting hearing you say that, because when Ty was talking about the improv in season 1, I sort of had a note of your 2 episodes, 6 and 7, the semi-finale, mid-season finale, whatever you want to call it. that seemed to me like something that was because there was so much going on and you were closing out, doing any kind of finale. You need to tie up some loose ends or at least set up what's going to happen in the next half of the season. It felt to me like you would have less improv there because that was the impression I got, that it was very tightly scripted.
It's definitely tightly scripted. And I don't want to give the impression that they just go and shoot a lot of unorganized or undisciplined stuff. But as you said, I think the 2 episodes I worked on were even more tightly done in that way because they were the sort of last 2 of the first half of the season. But there are just sections, you get particular beats where there is a lot more exploration done on set. Maya has a monologue in episode 6 where she's sort of dressed as Elizabeth Taylor and Virginia Woolf in her bedroom, and Maya being Maya, just, kind of, she wrote that episode and also kind of went in different directions during that monologue and tried different things. And there are different spots. Even Michael Angarano is the drama teacher. The scenes with him and the kids, there's quite a bit of playfulness and some outside the line stuff. But I do think you're right. I think that episodes 6 and 7, they were so tightly scripted that there were more pockets of improvisation for me than there was improv throughout.
So for Amelia and Tai, having worked on both seasons, season 1 seems a little more playful, a little more wacky is not the right word, but I'll say wacky. And then when you get into season 2, the issues are more authentic to what a teenager would be going through. When you're a teenager, these things that happen like changes with your body or romantic relationships or your parents going through a divorce, they're huge, impactful things to you. So whether it was Maya and Anna or Sam, the discussions you had about going into season 2, this is how we're going to take the show. This is how things are going to shift a little bit, and we're going to leave season 1 behind in certain ways.
Yeah, I felt like that was always their intention, was to go kind of darker and realer with it in season 2. The first couple episodes of season 1 are kind of more typical comedy. And by the end of season 1, it gets so real and so dark. Like I remember the first time Tai showed me his cut of episode 9 and Anna's parents are getting divorced and I'm like crying in his edit bay. And it's like, you don't expect that from the show. But when they started season 2, I think it was a very conscious choice for Maya, Anna, and Sam to not start over. They're not going to go back to first day of school and that kind of leaning into the 2000s nostalgia that we did very heavily at the beginning of the show. But it's just actually jumping off of episode 10 of season 1 and just going to that darker, realer place. When I first met Maya and Anna and Sam and I was interviewing for the show, we talked a lot about wanting it to not just be a comedy. I mean, this was before season 1 shot at all, that it was just, this is a comedy that gets really dark and it has a lot of very real moments. And we need the editing to be able to go seamlessly between the 2.
So one thing we didn't talk about, and I generally start the interviews talking about this, is how you got on the show. So Tai, for obvious reasons, I'm going to save you for last in terms of like how you found out about the show and got on the show. But Amelia and John, why don't we start with you in terms of how you joined PEN15?
Well, Sam Zwiebelman is from St. Louis, and so is Doc Krotzer, a favorite of the Rough Cut podcast.
He's a favorite to anybody that knows him.
Oh, love him. And as I've said before on this podcast, he's a longtime mentor and friend of mine. And through the St. Louis grapevine, I guess, he got called to edit the show. And he wasn't available, so he put me up in his place. And I went and met Anna, Maya, Sam, and I was obsessed with the show because there was a 10-minute pilot presentation that they had made, which I think was how they helped get the show funded. They sent me that before I interviewed, and it was the weirdest, funniest thing, and I was just obsessed with it. And I watched it so many times, and I was like, I have to do this show. And so when I went in and interviewed with them, we just kind of clicked on that. And as I was driving home from the interview, I got an email that was like, we want to offer you the job. I didn't even make it home, like the 15-minute drive. I was so excited.
They should all be like that.
Yeah.
John, you from St. Louis?
I am not, no. I actually have known Anna and Maya for some years now. And I had actually just done a movie with Maya as she was about to get started on production of season 1 of Penn. Because of scheduling, I wasn't going to be available. So I was never actually offered the job or anything, but we had talked about the show and I was very aware of it and very excited about it. And I have quite a few friends who work on the show. So I was really excited. And when they were going into season 2, Sam sort of took me out to lunch and sort of threatened me and said, if you don't actually come work on this season, we're done. So I was very lucky to come to come join for a couple of episodes. It was sort of a thing where I was really itching to go. And since the schedules were able to just line up, I was able to squeeze in and get in there and join everybody. And it was great.
All right, Ty, you knew it was coming around to you. So tell us about how this project came to you. And more importantly, your thoughts about, can I do this project with the nature of it and the fact that it's my sister?
Ugh, yeah. I first met Maya back in the 80s. 87 to be exact. She and Anna, and I met Anna back in, I think she had just moved out to LA in like 2012, and they produced and starred in a series called Project Reality together, and I edited a lot of those episodes. And so I had edited kind of both of them before, but obviously they weren't playing themselves. And they were actually developing, along with Sam, the PEN15 treatment next door. We lived in a duplex. We would kind of live together, and I would hear them next door, the three of them. And sometimes they were laughing, sometimes they were yelling at each other. It was just like all this drama. And then one day Maya came over with the treatment, and and it's the treatment that Amelia is kind of referring to. It turned into this 10-minute pilot presentation. And I read it and I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is really, this is what you guys have been concocting next door. Like, this is really something. And then it kind of, it took, I feel like it took like 5 or 6 years before they finally got it, greenlit and off the ground. When I interviewed with the producers, I was definitely, there's some episodes in there that I thought would be amazing, but I really didn't want to edit ideally. Matt McBrayer edited the 3rd episode, which is incredible. It's the one where, Maya discovers masturbation. And then, but, even like episode, I think one of the best reviewed episodes of the 1st season, episode 6, which Amelia edited, Posh. It's an amazing episode, but it's really heavy. I've only watched it one time, and that was like, that was enough. It was great. I thought it was incredible, but it's tough. Sometimes it can be a really fun show to work on, but other times, honestly, it can be a little draining, and, it just like teleports me like right back to the 90s. I'm just like, oh man, some of the more emotional scenes, or even the scenes where Maya is whining or, having a tantrum. Those are the ones where I'm just like, oof, that's take 1 of 6 that I got to get through. And that's just the close-ups. So but it ultimately has been an incredibly rewarding show. And I'm just happy that it's been received as well as it has.
Did the actor that plays Maya's brother in the show come to you for advice or guidance?
That kid is way cooler than I was and ever will be. No, I've not met Dallas. I think his name is, plays Shuji. That character is just, the similarities end at the fact that I'm her brother and that I think I had that hair at some point. The part in the middle when I was in like 6th or 7th grade. But I was never that cool in middle school. And no, he never came to me for any advice. I don't know what I would have said he did.
Well, as far as going to people for advice, you talked about going to each other's cutting rooms. Something I always like to find out about is, how closely were you working together on this show?
Well, pre-COVID, we were all together. On season 1, we were in this crazy building in Santa Monica, and we would eat every meal together, and just like there were scooters in the building and there were spinning chairs. It was a crazy time. But in season 2, we were in a more traditional post facility, I think because the show had a little success after season 1. We were all really close. We would go to coffee every day and talk about the scenes we were working on. We ate lunch together for the most part, as much as we could, till we went home. And then we were pretty much on our own islands because it was so fast. We weren't set up to work from home. So by the time we went home, we were all kind of just trying to get our stuff done, on our own.
When you were together, were you connected via shared storage? Were you able to share material? Did you ever have media that this little vignette was intended for this one episode, but it actually works better over here? Or were you able to steal from each other? Did that ever happen?
I actually don't think so, because everything's so specific for every episode. Like establishing shot here and there, but other than that, I don't really think there was much we could steal. Plenty of ADR and stuff. Like, you have endless audio of Maya and Anna being like, Maya, Anna, Anna, stop, Maya. And you can use that anywhere.
Yeah, Amelia was Meals was my go-to person for any Anna or Maya ADR that I needed. Amelia and Imanahat are one of our assistant editors.
Well, so for ADR for television, is that, I know in feature film, the editor goes to the ADR sessions. Will you get involved in ADR at all as a TV series, or does that not happen?
Well, on season 1, I don't know if you remember this, Tai. We had the kids, it's in episode 1, right? When all the kids are going, you just, and they're running back and forth in front of the locker. The kids came to where we were editing, and Michael Scotty, one of our assistant editors, was directing them, and they were running back and forth in front of microphones.
What? I don't remember that. Really?
You don't remember that? Yeah, and their parents showed up, and they're like, this is the show?
Oh, God.
They had to take off their shoes, and they were running back and forth in front of the microphone. And I remember Michael was like, this is the craziest thing ever. And we were just importing it and putting it for ADR. That was for Matt's episodes. I may be misremembering the details, but I believe it was for that sequence. No, but we had like real ADR and everything too. But that was just a certain circumstance. But it does make it easier, actually, with Maya and Anna being so heavily involved in post. We can just have them record whatever temp ADR lines, so we can see if it works right away. I did, me and Iman would do voices before Maya and Anna would get to post. But then once they were there, they could just record it on our phone and cut it in.
So for those of you playing along at home that haven't seen the show, you just regrettably stands for ugliest girl in school.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which they made up. And now I think kind of regret, like, did we just create this horrible word that people are going to use now? Like, what have we done?
The visual language that each of you are able to create with your episodes does seem like there aren't any strict rules or conventions from episode to episode, that within an episode you can play around with picture-in-picture or how you do montage and things like that. So how much is actually left up to you to just do whatever you want visually or try different things visually?
I mean, I think we're pretty free to try anything, honestly. They gave us a lot of room to play, and Maya and Anna and Sam are really open to seeing things that they didn't envision on the day. What comes to mind is like in episode 6 in Posh in season 1, when Anna's doing her Am I Racist? Ask Jeeves search. And, I kind of, all those images that come up on the screen over her, the way the scene is shot is she's just sitting there, and then there's a green screen computer, and she types, and then she clicks. And that's pretty much all the dailies. And so I kind of made the decision to like montage it over her face and put all the images in the sky. And actually our sound editor had the idea to put in like the sounds of Martin Luther King giving a speech, and all that kind of sound bed in there was all built during the mix. But those were all initially just, I did screen recordings on my computer and then like cropped them and faded them and created that whole thing. And I guess they liked it. So, yeah, but John did a lot of really cool stuff in play where like they're all that stuff was so awesome. I loved that.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, we had that. We had a montage specifically in 206. It's a rehearsal montage, and they had shot so much stuff for it. It was really, really great. But Anna and Maya actually, unusually, were not available at the same time. So each half was shot separately. The kids on the stage rehearsing the play, and Anna directing them from the actual gallows or whatever. So I was sort of free. My first pass of that, I was sort of free to just kind of put that together however. So I spent quite a lot of time just shaping that. Days shaping that. And then Sam came in, and for his director's cut, we played around with a lot of things, reworked a lot of things. And then when I worked with Anna and Maya, we also reshaped it. But there was a lot of freedom to try anything with that montage in particular.
Tai, you were talking about the flashbacks, and one of the ways of setting the scene, quote unquote, is through music and needle drops and things like that. Did you guys all have the freedom to mess around there? How did that work? Yeah,
absolutely. And at the end of the day, we were actually able to get more tracks than I thought we'd be able to get. I mean, we got a slightly bigger music budget in the second season, so we were able to get even more. But yeah, that's definitely a big part of it, is the music from that era. I mean, so much of it too is just the production design as well, and the costumes and the props. Also, what they did in color, they did some slight kind of graininess, like they added some grain to the picture, In fact, at one point they really went far with it. It almost kind of looked like dirty film, and I was really into it, but that got nixed. I think it was just like a bit too much. But it felt really 90s to me, which I was like, oh, cool. Because I know one of the big influences for just kind of like the style of the film was the Todd Solondz film, Welcome to the Dollhouse. That's like, one of their big influences for the series in general. So just kind of trying to have that aesthetic, which also kind of played into how we edited the show. Like I remember early on in season 1, I was going in for maybe just more like traditional coverage a lot of the time. And once they saw it, they're kind of like, no, let's just try to stay in some of these 2 shots for as long as we can. And like really just kind of let it play out just make it less cutty. Just like kind of want to just sit in the shot and let it play out. That was a good learning experience for me.
Well, you mentioned Welcome to the Dollhouse. Were there other things they came to you and said, well, we're going for this tone or this look and feel based on this show or this movie?
I feel like Election was brought up a little bit during season 1. Welcome to the Dollhouse was the biggest one, absolutely. And maybe Now and Then as well.
Now and Then, right. Yeah, that's another one. Yeah, Welcome to the Dollhouse for sure. I'm trying to think if there were more.
Actually, Maya and Anna had not seen this movie, so this is my own kind of inspiration. But it was the movie, the summer that 8th grade came out, that we were editing season 1 of PEN15. And I used a lot of temp score from 8th grade because I loved it. And I felt like 8th grade was all of the most serious moments from PEN15 put together. And like I said, Maya and Anna and Sam had not seen it. And I think they actively chose not to watch it until after season 1 came out because they didn't want to be influenced by anything. But for me, I felt like that was a strong reference of like, oh, when we're in the most serious moments in the show, I want it to feel that scary or that real, or, So that was a personal reference that I really like to draw from.
So we haven't talked about your assistants and how that works here. On some series, there are a couple of assistants that are shared amongst the editors. Then on others, it's each editor has a dedicated assistant. How did that work on PEN15?
We had 2 assistant editors. The first season is Michael Scotty Jr. and Emma Chinya Lee. She's now on Avatar for probably the rest of her life. And the second season, Michael Scotty Jr. again and Iman Ahad. And then at some point we had others, but it was only just because
we had one more editor and then still only 2 assistant editors. So they were definitely kind of stretched thin in terms of their workload. They did so much for us. I mean, we had a ton of improv, and they script sync all of it. So for all 4 editors, and also we cross-boarded the whole season. Season 2A was all shot cross-boarded, like every episode was inter-shot. And then season 2B as well. But so they were just taking everything in and just distributing it out to the editor whose episode it was as quickly as possible. And then they were also, sending out cuts, working on continuities, helping out with sound design where they could, helping out with temp VFX. So they really just were doing so much. But basically we would get the dailies and then we couldn't have script sync until a little bit later because it just takes time, and we didn't have all the bodies to help out.
I want to go back to talking about getting on a show. What you hear most often from people about getting jobs or what they look for when they're hiring somebody is just the personal aspects of it. Not so much their resume, but can I sit with this person for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day? Do they have the same style and sensibilities that I do or that's right for this show? Whether it's specific to the pandemic or just moving forward, maybe this is the way it'll be, but a lot of people now are having to interview via Zoom. What is that like and how hard is that to convey your personality, your style, your sensibilities in a little, 3-inch window on a screen? And I guess part 2 of that question is, what advice would you have for people moving forward that are just starting out and going through the interview process?
I mean, I feel like for me that if you are passionate about something or if you're passionate about the material, you can kind of get that across over Zoom. It's just a little bit harder.
I think, definitely if your passion comes across, that's a big part of it. And like you said, just if your personalities click. I've been really fortunate so far. The assistant editors and other editors I've worked with have just all been very fun to be around. I mean, this show's been I probably spent way too much, like John was saying, way too much time in other people's bays. It's kind of like, hey, let me see something, or let's go grab some coffee and, and just chat it up. I miss that, I mean, it's working from home there are definitely aspects of it that I love. I mean, there's no commute, there's no LA traffic to deal with or any of that. But I deal with all that just to be able to walk down Amelia or John or Matt's bay and be able to have that kind of personal connection. And, even if it's not chatting about the show specifically, that's a big thing that I miss, I think.
I feel like during season 1 of PEN15, like, because it was just me, Matt, Tai, the assistant editors, Maya, Anna, and Sam. And we were in this, like I said, this crazy building. And every day we would eat lunch and dinner together, and we would take the time and sit down. And I feel like because we would take that time, or we would take a coffee walk, or, the creative ideas were a lot of times born from those kind of social interactions. And I think I really missed that as well from doing it on Evercast. It's like you get on Evercast and it's just down to business. And then you take your break separately because you're not going to sit in front of the screen to do that. So yeah, I think that a little bit of that. Luckily, we already knew Maya and Anna and Sam. And so when we work virtually, it's not as weird as just like meeting someone for the first time in that situation.
John, with your made-for-FM radio voice, you can't tell me that you're not purpose-built for remote interviews. Come on, this has got to be easy for you.
Remote interviews are certainly more difficult, as are remote edit sessions, just being away from people instead of face-to-face, instead of in the same room. But I think it is, to what both Amelia and Tai said, it's about enthusiasm. It's about conveying enthusiasm. If you're going into interview in particular for something that has a first season or has source material, familiarizing yourself with it and finding what it is about it that excites you, I think is the key to any in-person interview or remote interview, because the people that you're interviewing with are the ones who are taking it the most seriously and putting the most into it. So the most that you can let them know you're excited about it, you would be excited to work in service of that story and in service of what it is they're after. It is certainly harder to do over Zoom, but I would say just sticking to that as an ethos for interviews is generally the way I go.
Well, considering the nature of this show, there's no way I can close out this interview with your standard garden variety question. So since the show is about those teenage years, those awkward teenage years, I'm going to ask each of you, which of the characters in the show, could be Maya, could be Anna, could be any of the cast, do you most relate to and why?
I would say for me, the Sam, Gabe, Jafir trio, as they have their weird little books and their weird little things they work on, and they have their own internal conversations and weird things. That's what I look at. I was that weird kid, and my friends and I had all sorts of stuff we wouldn't show anybody else that we worked on together, which I'm sure is true of all kids, really. But those are the three together that I look at and think, oh, I was probably the most like those kids.
Yeah.
The Weasel magazine.
The Weasel
magazine.
Yeah. I feel like I relate to Anna the most. That's my, definitely me in middle school sort of situation. But I don't know. I got aspects of Maya as well. The scene that Matt edited in episode 4 of season 2, where they're trying on clothes with their moms. I'm like, this is way too real. The first time I watched it, I was like, that's the realest thing I've ever seen.
Okay, that counts. You're an Anna. I wish people could see Tai laughing. But,
I'm thinking.
Do you have to think, Tai? I mean, it's really a character based on you.
Yeah, but again, that kid is so much cooler than I was and ever will be.
But only you know that.
That's true. I'm totally Shuji.
Yeah.
I'll just take it.
Well, you guys all did a great job. And Tai, bonus points to you. That has got to be the weirdest thing ever working on this show.
Now, honestly, the weirdest thing, which I didn't mention, was seeing my mom kiss another Richard Karn from Home Improvement. That was just like, I've never seen my mom kiss anyone but my dad. And Maya got annoyed at my mom. She was like, you don't have to kiss him on the lips. Like, what do you do? And she was like,
so it wasn't that it was Richard Karn from Home Improvement. It was just because there was another guy.
Yeah, both. I mean, I never really watched Home Improvement to be honest. But I was aware of it, and I was aware of the guy from Tool Time. And I was like, oh, now he's kissing my mom.
So Tim Allen would have been okay. Richard Karn, no.
It would all have been weird. It's very strange. I never thought I'd find myself in a position where I'm editing my mom or
my mom would have more Instagram followers than me.
You know, they need some kind of Emmy for best editor in a series in which the editor's mother is kissing that guy from Home Improvement. I would tune in to watch those awards. And you should tune in to watch PEN15 if you haven't yet. Please join me in thanking Tai, Amelia, and John, and Matt McBrayer, even though he couldn't make it. They were fun and very kind to give up some of their time to talk with us. Time is a precious thing, even more so than money. But if you spend your time wisely, it can make you money. So spend a little time learning the nonlinear editing system that's the backbone of all the biggest shows and movies, the official NLE of the Rough Cut podcast. I speak, of course, of Avid Media Composer. In fact, you can save 20% off a new one-year subscription to Media Composer Ultimate until June 30th. So act now. Operators are standing by. Why? I don't know. You don't have to make a call. Just go to the link I put in the show notes, and you are more than halfway there. And with that, we have come to the end of another Rough Cut podcast. But we will, I hope, be back with another episode next week. So please come back and visit again for that one. Until then, this is Matt Fury thanking you for joining me right here on The Rough Cut.